Please imagine the following. You wake up in the middle of the night, your body frozen in place. You try to move your arms, your legs, nothing. The room is silent except for the faint hum of the night, the distant ticking of a clock. A heavy weight settles on your chest, pressing down, making it difficult to breathe. Then, you notice it. In the corner of the room, near the doorway or at the foot of your bed, stands a tall, shadowy figure. His form is dark, darker than the night itself, as if he is absorbing the light around him. His shoulders are broad, his stance unwavering. But the most chilling detail is the wide-brimmed hat sitting atop his head. He does not move. He does not speak, but he is watching. The longer you stare, the more the fear coils in your stomach. Your heartbeat pounds against your ribs. You try to scream, but your throat is locked, trapped in silence. And then, something shifts. Two glowing red eyes, or perhaps just the oppressive void where his face should be, seem to bore into you. Some say he simply watches, unmoving, as if studying. Others describe a slow, deliberate motion. He leans closer, inch by inch, as if savoring the fear. The weight on your chest intensifies. You feel a suffocating sense of dread, an unshakable certainty that he is more than a shadow. He is something ancient, something powerful. And just when you think the terror will consume you, he disappears. Vanished. You gasp as control over your body suddenly returns. You bolt upright, sweat-soaked, your heart still hammering. The room is exactly as it was before. No figure, no movement, just an empty doorway, a quiet darkness. But you know what you saw, and you are not alone. The Hat Man is a mysterious figure reported by people around the world. This shadowy figure is typically described as a tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat and sometimes a long trench coat. Unlike other shadow people, who are often vague or featureless, the Hat Man is usually described as having a more defined outline and sometimes glowing red or white eyes. The common features of the Hat Man are a tall, shadowy figure, often over 6 feet tall, wears a hat, usually a fedora, wide-brimmed hat, or a bowler hat, red or white glowing eyes, though some report just a dark, featureless face. People frequently feel frozen in place and overwhelmed with dread when they see him. He always appears at night, most commonly in bedrooms, doorways, or dark corners. He may linger longer than other shadow figures. Witnesses claim he watches them for extended periods before vanishing. So what is this mysterious creature that people all over the world are seeing? Some explanations include sleep paralysis, a well-documented phenomenon where a person wakes up unable to move, often accompanied by terrifying hallucinations. The brain is in a transition state between REM sleep and wakefulness, which can cause vivid and frightening imagery. Pareidolia, the tendency of the brain to see familiar shapes in random stimuli, such as shadows in a dark room. Jungian archetypes. Some psychologists suggest the Hat Man represents a deep-seated cultural or subconscious fear, such as a manifestation of authority, death, or the unknown. A mass psychological phenomenon. The Hat Man legend has spread through word of mouth, horror stories, and the internet, leading people to expect and then experience him. Supernatural theories. Some believe the Hat Man is a spiritual entity, a demon, or an interdimensional being. Paranormal accounts often link him to negative energy, feeding off fear. Pop culture influence. The Hat Man has appeared in horror movies, creepypasta stories, and urban legends. Some link him to historical folklore about shadowy figures or the Grim Reaper. He has been featured in books and documentaries about paranormal experiences. The Hat Man is a widely reported but unexplained phenomenon that blends psychology, sleep disorders, and folklore. Whether he is a trick of the mind or something more mysterious, the stories about him remain eerie and persistent. Hospital visitation. When I was a teenager, I got shot by some random psychopath while walking to the nearest gas station. When I awoke in the ICU, there was a dark, shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed next to my mom. It appeared to be wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a coat with a tall collar. I pointed to him and asked, "Who's that?" As I asked, it was as if I remembered that she wouldn't be able to see him. My mom did that wide-eyed, spine chill, goosebumps reaction as she turned to look. She looked back at me and said, "It's just me and the nurse, honey." As she said that, the figure tipped its hat and disappeared. It is said that there is not just one Hat Man, but many Hat Men. They wear various hats, and each entity has their own role. Here is a Hatman sighting from the United Kingdom. There is a legend of a Hat Man the locals call Conk in a town near where I live in the UK. He was seen outside by fully awake people. One person who saw him as a child in the 70s said he was 7 to 8 foot tall, in black clothes with a black hat and a see-through head. He spoke to them and told them he wouldn't hurt them. People report feeling of being watched in the area he was seen. Reports of him date back at least to the mid-20th century, so long before the internet. No one knows where the name originated. Here is an account with the Hatman in a group home. In one of the group homes I used to work in, there were odd occurrences. Upstairs on my overnight shifts, I'd hear voices or have doors open and wedge into the floor when no one else was home. Downstairs was very different. The house had 2 suites in it, upstairs and downstairs, with one high-risk youth living in each. At night, there was only one person working at each house. Following an incident in that house where a night worker dropped dead during a shift, heart attack, or an aneurysm, we have to phone and check in with all the other night workers every 2 hours throughout the 10-hour shift. During my shifts, I avoided going downstairs if I could. The vibe was off. It felt old and unfriendly, and on more than one occasion, I'd walked past the long hall that led to the storage room, and I swear I'd see a tall man in a hat. He was never there when I looked back. One of the kiddos that lived down there had a bad trip one night. She'd relapsed and was seeing shadow people. I called the ambulance and stayed with her. She kept telling me that the man in the hat was angry and watching her, and she couldn't stay here. It was terrifying. I don't remember if I mentioned the man with the hat that I'd seen to her. I feel like I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have wanted her to be afraid of her room downstairs. But I also feel I must have told her, and it must have been from that the drugs pulled her horrific hallucinations, but it chilled me to the bone. I don't know if ever made anything but short trips down there after that. I felt bad, but that downstairs floor did not get swept or mopped nearly as often as it should have. But I'm not doing it at the dead of night. Here is an account of a Hatman sightings from a family. The first time the story was relayed to me was from my dad. The story goes that he and my uncle were on a hunting trip in a rural area of Tennessee. This would have been sometime in the early to mid-70s. My dad had gotten settled in his tree stand just before dawn. Not long after getting in the stand, he heard something coming through the woods. Naturally, he was expecting to see a deer. He said that whatever this thing was, it certainly was no deer. It stopped at the base of the tree my dad was in, looked up at him, and then continued on in the direction of my uncle. My dad described it as wearing a black cape, black top hat, and having no discernible facial features when it looked up at him. His exact words were, "It had no face." My uncle described seeing the exact same thing a few minutes later. Everyone in my family has heard the story, and it affected Dad and Uncle so much that they never went into the woods before dawn again. The second story comes from my mother-in-law and brother-in-law in the early 2000s. They were both working a cleaning contract for a large metro church that required them to secure all doors to the building before leaving at night. They usually finished up around 11 at night. They have both had sightings separately and together of a tall, dark figure wearing a long coat and top hat. They always saw the hat man at the end of a long corridor, and it never acknowledged them. It was never seen up close. I don't know what this thing is, but I would trust these people with my life. They have no reason to make up stories just for the sake of it. I personally would be hesitant to recount such a story for fear of being ridiculed. Nothing to gain and credibility to lose. It's really a no-win situation for the people that have seen the Hat Man. I kinda want to see him myself, and then again I kinda don't. Childhood sighting of the Hatman. Seen him my whole childhood started when we moved to a new house when I was about 7 or 8. Prior to this, I never was afraid of the dark or to sleep by myself. That changed after the first time I seen him sitting, possibly leaning, not standing, in the corner by the window in my room. I remember asking, "Who are you?" And when he didn't answer me, just still the eye felt fear and ran to my parents' room where I told my mom, but my stepdad wouldn't let me sleep with them and told my mom I'm fine. I don't know why she didn't even go check with me, but she didn't and made me go back to my room by myself. He was still sitting in the corner of my room when I got back, just looking. I screamed and ran back to my mom, where this the time she was getting up to look with me, but all of a sudden there was loud scratch or noise downstairs which got my stepdad up. Our dog got out of a locked door into the garage, then got locked in the garage and was scratching at the door. My mom walked me back to my room and laid down with me. I'm sure she didn't see anything because she didn't say or act like she did, but I'm not sure if he was still there or not because once she turned the light off in my room, I didn't look to the corner again to check, too scared to see him again. The first 10x I seen him that first year, I would get my mom. But as the years went on and he never did anything but sit there in the corner, nothing else, I stopped feeling the fear I initially had. I don't know if this is the same Hat Man I experienced as a child and well into my teens BC. After so long, I didn't feel the crippling fear when seeing him. Also, we would have a lot of activity that would happen upstairs where I think he mainly stayed. When I was 7, we moved to Fort Myers, into a neighborhood called Heritage Farms. That's when her and my father were looking at the property with the real estate agent. They ended up splitting up my father in what was to be their bedroom with the real estate agent, and my mother in the back 2 bedrooms, which was me and my brother's rooms. My mom said she should have told my dad from the get-go that she had a very overwhelmingly oppressive, heavy, creepy feeling and ran back to the other bedroom to meet my father. She said that was her first red flag, something was wrong with that house. Well, my mother never told my father, and they eventually ended up buying the house. Cut to about 6 months later, I was heavily picked on in that neighborhood, I was very clingy to my mother and father. And when you walked the hallways of the house, it felt like something was sticking right on your back, kind of like lurking to where you would end up running to your destination in your own house. After about 6 months, I eventually told my parents that I could hear people in my closet talking, and I would hear a laughing, and someone whispering, "Hey, you," and then there would be another laugh. I remember that I heard the noise of what seemed like cards shuffling and an old saloon piano playing. But the noise seemed to come from very far away, like my closet was a mile long, which made me want to sleep in my brother's room all the time, and even more so because he was 17 at the time and was always out with his friends or working or at church. I'm not quite sure if anyone here is familiar with a Friday night lineup back in the 80s called TGIF, where they had Full House, Family Matters, and I think two other shows. But my parents used to let me stay up late and watch that whole lineup. Needless to say, I was in my brother's room at the time, covered up, but watching that lineup. The very back bedroom was my brother's. Then you had a door to the left that was a bathroom with another little door made metal, mind you. And off to the right with my bedroom that I didn't want to sleep in, and an opening to the living room into the kitchen, and what have you. So, I was watching the shows and I had this desire, feeling, urge, or whatever you want to call it, to crane my head to look out into the hallway. It was approximately 9 or so, and the house was black save for the hue of my TV. When I craned my neck to look out, in the middle of the hallway, between the bathroom and my bedroom that I didn't want to sleep in, was a tall, blacker than the black of night, figure with a hat on its head and a round thing in his hand. Did not have red eyes. It did not say anything or made any noise. It just stood there, made itself known, and quietly walked or floated to the left, and I could hear the metal door in my bathroom leading to the patio pool area open and close. And man, did I scream for my parents, bloodily. So, in an effort to make an already long post just a hair shorter, I explained to my parents what I saw and begged to sleep with them. Of course, my dad, I thought I was nuts, had an overactive imagination, so on and so forth. The sleeping in the room took a toll on my father, and he got really nasty with me and demanded that I start sleeping in my room. That's when my mother spoke up and said to him that no, he's going to be sleeping with us because I saw the same thing. She said that she saw it in the daytime when she was washing dishes in that same hallway in the back bedrooms. My mom is not a spooky kind of woman, and she said she thought, the angel of death. I guess having my mom and dad know that I wasn't lying made it a little easier to still continue to sleep in that back bedroom. So I did. But my dad is kind of a right here, right now, tangible kind of man. So that goes without saying that he thought my mom and I were both nuts. My mom and I went to Baltimore to see my grandparents, and I guess just to get away. Well, about 3 or 4 days later, I remember my mom sitting in my grandmom's house. Got a call from my father, and he was very, very upset. He said that he wants us home because he saw what we saw, and said that he was very scared. So we came home about 3 or 4 days later after the phone call. And there was 3 or 4 days to give my dad enough time to see a couple more things. He said that one night he came home from work, made himself something to eat, turned on the TV in the living room by those two back bedrooms, and he said that he looked off into the back bedroom and said that he saw what looked like many tiny stick figures walking and jumping around. He said it spooked him so much he slept out on the patio, on one of those PVC recliners that we had, with our dog. It's a really odd thing, but to hear your dad make those kind of claims, when, like I said, He's a very real, tangible kind of person. That story always spooked me to death. I remember one day after school, I walked home from the bus stop and found my mother sitting outside, which she never does. She told me that she heard the garage door open and close and the doors that lead from the garage to the entirety of the house open and close. And something hollered, "Mom, I'm home." She was in her bedroom making the bed and thought my brother got home from school early. So she said, "I'm back here, Howard." Then one more time, "Mom, I'm home." She looked. There was no truck, no trace of my brother. She called the high school, and he was in class. My mom was telling me one day that she was washing dishes, and the way our kitchen was set up at the time was you had the bar that she could see there's two back bedrooms. You have an opening, then you had closed off wall. And then you have another opening which led to the back hallway to my mom and dad's bedroom. So it was an open-ended kitchen. She said that she happened to look over and saw a tiny man wearing a suit and a top hat walk by that opening by the kitchen, look at her, look away, and then continue to walk, but she never saw him again at the second opening at the kitchen. And she would see wisps of smoke constantly. We thought all the activity in the house was subjected to those back bedrooms. I remember my dad, my mom, and I watching something on TV one night sitting on their bed, and my dad had this pink recliner by the opening of their doorway. He loved this thing. I remember that we all looked over the same time and saw something black as pitch peering up over the top of the recliner, and when we made eye contact with it, it took off towards wherever in the house. I remember contacting the owner of the house when I was around 22, 23 years old, explaining what I'm explaining to you now. They never wrote back, but what I experienced in that house always had a profound effect on me, and I have never seen anything since.